And in less than a minute, we'll open the webinar for everyone to come in.
Thanks, Alexander.
You're welcome.
Everyone can still see my screen okay, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Webinar is open for everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll give folks a minute to join and then we'll get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to day one of World Water Week. My name is Megan Meadows, and I'm the Director of the Division of Energy Assistance within the Office of Community Services at the Administration for Children and Families. The Office of Community Services, or OCS, will begin in celebration and recognition of World Water Week 2024 with a panel discussion. The goal of today's discussion is to discuss water accessibility and affordability across the U.S. We will also use this time to spotlight the impact of the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, or LIHWAP. And additionally, panelists will discuss data that's available, provide information on programs in some areas that continue to serve populations in need, and share other resources to address water affordability. We hope today's information shared will provide ideas for you to think about ways to develop programs and continue to address water affordability within your communities. Our agenda today, we will begin the panel discussion with a message from the Administration for Children and Families Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Jeff Hild, who is extending a warm welcome and introduction to World Water Week. Next, we will provide a brief introduction of the panelists, followed by a general overview of LIHWAP, highlighting the impact of the program through the LIHWAP Implementation and Impact Report, Part 1, and key findings from the LIHWAP Water Utility Affordability Survey Report. After this, we will move into our panel discussion and end with a list of resources. Let's now take a moment and listen to Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Hild's welcome.
Hello, my name is Jeff Hild, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Administration for Children and Families, or ACF, at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and I use he, him, his pronouns. ACF is proud to recognize World Water Week again this year, a global event focused on water access, affordability, and quality. To kick off the week, we're hosting this panel discussion featuring representatives from the Office of Community Services and partners who are working on water affordability and ways to help families across the country who are struggling with their utility bills. ACF's mission is to promote the economic and social well-being of children, families, individuals, and communities nationwide through programs and initiatives such as the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, or LIHWAP, and the Rural Community Development Program, or RCD. Water affordability has been an ongoing, unaddressed need throughout the country, and the pandemic brought this need to the forefront. LIHWAP was the first ever federally funded program dedicated to providing water and wastewater assistance to households in need. LIHWAP provided funds to states, tribes, and territories to prevent water disconnections, reconnect disconnected water services, and reduce rates for low-income households. And I'm proud to share that LIHWAP has provided assistance to over 1.7 million households across the United States, a truly remarkable achievement. During today's discussion, you will hear about the impact of LIHWAP, as well as research to help better understand the landscape of water affordability. You will also hear from experts in the field regarding data on the cost of clean water, what some areas are doing to help address local water affordability needs, and from our federal partners at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to share information about their WaterSense program, including steps we can all take to save water and protect the environment. I'm also excited to share that we are releasing a new story map on the OCS World Water Week webpage tomorrow that highlights how the Rural Community Development Program provides flexible assistance to address water and wastewater problems in rural and tribal communities with low income. And stay tuned throughout this week as we release additional resources highlighting the impact of LIHWAP and RCD, including one-page overviews and spotlight videos. As we recognize World Water Week, I want to express my sincere gratitude for the work of ACF grant recipients and stakeholders who helped administer and ensure the success of LIHWAP, and for the ongoing work of our RCD grant recipients and partners. Your dedication to these programs has helped households across the country gain access and afford a critical basic need. We couldn't do this work without you, and we thank you for all that you do every day to support the families and individuals we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for your warm welcome message. Now I'd like to take a minute and introduce the panelists that you'll hear from me today. Joining me will be Gwen Donnelly, data scientist with the Division of Energy Assistance here at OCS, Christina Surface, Government Affairs Managing Director for the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. We'll also be joined by Chris Hornbach, who is the Deputy CEO for the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, Tammy Maynard, the Director of Governmental Affairs from the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina, and Robert Ballinger, Senior Attorney for Community Legal Services Incorporated, representing the City of Philadelphia. Following those presenters, we will hear from Tony Searles, Commercial Service Superintendent for the Greater Cincinnati Water Works, Patrice West, our Program Operations Branch Chief in OCS for the Division of Community Discretionary and Demonstration Programs, and Ellen Tarquino, Center Director for the Water Infrastructure and Resiliency Finance Center at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. A special thank you to all of our participants for joining us today and sharing their insights. So let's begin today's discussion talking about LIHWAP. As Jeff shared, due to the unique circumstances surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, there was an underlying household need revealing how critical the program's formation was to help ease the unexpected burden on U.S. households. This led to the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program, better known as LIHWAP. LIHWAP was the first ever federal program to assist families with water and wastewater bills. One of the legislation's principal objectives for the development of the LIHWAP were to mirror off our existing programs to expedite providing water assistance to communities as quickly as possible, and also to make direct payments to water utility providers. Over $1 billion was appropriated to serve households at or below 150% of the federal poverty guidelines or 60% of the state median income. The program priorities have included restoring water services, preventing disconnection, reducing rate charges, and providing other water-related services for households. Within these guidelines, grant recipients had the flexibility in how the program was administered and what type of assistance they prioritize based on their evaluation of needs within their specific communities. LIHWAP built partnerships with grant recipients throughout the United States. 50 state grant recipients, including the District of Columbia and excluding North Dakota, 97 tribal and tribal organizations, and 5 territories administered the program. Originally, grant recipients were enrolling households until September 30th of 2023. Then in July of 2023, OCS offered a one-time no-cost extension, and 89 LIHWAP grant recipients continue to enroll households until March 31st of 2024. Through the collaborative efforts of OCS with LIHWAP grant recipients, partners, and stakeholders, LIHWAP has helped over 1.7 million households. This includes 844,000 disconnections prevented, 140,000 water services restored, and 810,000 rate reductions as of March 31st of this year. The most recent reporting has also indicated that 97% of LIHWAP funds have been drawn down. Additional data, such as average benefit, will be included in the updates of our LIHWAP Implementation and Impact Final Report, which will be coming out later this year. Now we'll transition into what we learned from our first year of LIHWAP implementation and reporting. You can find the LIHWAP Implementation and Impact Report Part 1 on our website and included in the resources section of this presentation. And as I mentioned, a final report will be issued later this fall. Within LIHWAP Implementation Impact Report, we highlight key lessons that we learned from the implementation process and the impact on the households through the lens of the grant recipients and utility providers. Examples of these include how we were able to adjust benefit levels for households, allowing for credits on beneficiary accounts, data matching, and collaborative outreach. Given that this is the first of its kind program, it was important to be flexible and adjust program design where possible to meet the changing needs of communities. This was discovered after the utility disconnection moratorium enacted during the COVID-19 pandemic ended, which left some households with larger water bills. And as administering agencies received applicant water bills and learned more about the cost of water and wastewater in their area, these payment limits were adjusted to serve households more effectively and prevent service disconnections. Next, OCS understood from the data gathered since LIHWAP's enactment that providing credits on water accounts was a proactive method to reach more households and promote long-term water affordability. The strategy was employed by the creation of a benefit matrix to determine credit amounts based on factors like household size, income, and water cost. Another lesson learned around data matching is grant recipients utilize data matching to identify applicants who may be eligible for LIHWAP through other existing databases, which expedited providing assistance to households and led to increasing the number of households served. Lastly, another major effort in the successful implementation of LIHWAP was based on the creative efforts of grant recipients and their collaborative outreach strategies to partner with local agencies, vendors, utility organizations, and other organizations to contact eligible households and spread the information about LIHWAP. In addition, other key lessons that we've learned along the way was to provide funding flexibilities to address challenges and give specific guidance in areas, for example, without public water systems or treatment works, which affected many of the rural areas served. OCS allowed grant recipients to provide LIHWAP funding to households that needed bottled water due to the lack of clean water, septic tank services in areas without wastewater systems, and filling water cisterns for households not connected to drinking water problems. Subsequently, the achievements of LIHWAP were grounded on following the models created by other anti-poverty programs, such as the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program and the Community Services Block Grant. This approach permitted many states to develop their implementation plans, outreach tactics, administration, intake, and household eligibility determinations. Lastly, several states struggled to provide benefits to households with liens on their property because of past due water and wastewater bills. A few of the LIHWAP administrating agencies have been successful in working with municipalities and applicants to redeem property liens and put households one step closer to restoring their property rights. We highlight these accomplishments to show the complexities of water accessibility and affordability and to help guide others on how to take the rein and continue the efforts to assist households in need. With that overview, I'll now transition to Gwen to discuss the LIHWAP Water Utility Affordability Report, which we published earlier this spring. Gwen?
Thank you, Megan, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So with this report, we sought to collect information directly from utilities to better understand the scope of water and wastewater debt, because there's currently no national data source on water and wastewater arrears or money that's past due to utilities, disconnections, and other fees all together in one data set. The findings from this work were primarily intended for LIHWAP grant recipients to help inform their program administration. But we believe that this work is of interest to highlight during this year's World Water Week as well. In our survey, which we conducted during 2023, we had a final data set of 1,882 responses, and these responses came from all but one state. And this includes responses from 12 tribally owned utilities, as well as one territory. In our data set, the average monthly water and wastewater rates were $126.20. On average, 16.2% of residential connections at utilities received a notice of disconnection due to non-payment in 2022. And this was the lowest among very small utilities and the highest at very large utilities. 20% of residential customers fell behind their bills at some point in 2022. And while the overall average amount of debt was $258, that average among very large utilities was $508.79 compared to debts in the $200 to $300 range for other utility sizes. Most utilities charged late fees and reconnection or disconnection fees, and 38% charged other fees like lien fees, relevant to what Megan was just talking about, legal fees or notice fees. And like I said, we received responses from 12 tribally owned utilities. Out of these, an average of 3% of their customers were disconnected from their water services, while 32% of those households were in arrears with an average debt of $501.56. The Water Utility Affordability Survey really emphasized vital components for water affordability and accessibility that we learned throughout the survey and through our work with grant recipients. So first was the importance of rate reductions, which we saw in cases where utilities had low average arrears, but they had high rates of disconnection, really emphasizing the importance of reducing existing rates. Secondly, was the importance of flexibility in minimum and maximum benefit amounts or eliminating those altogether. Some arrears were very low, but customers had already been disconnected, and other times arrears were extremely high and a partial payment wouldn't bring the household out of water debt. Next, the burden on utilities was critically important for understanding the fees and rates that they charged. And that includes things like sanitation and infrastructure costs, balancing rates with necessary upkeep expenses. Rates are so different across the country that it's hard to draw conclusions from subsets, and these rates are driven by much more than utility characteristics like size and geographic area. And finally, we would like to highlight the importance of LIHWAP payments for fees in addition to covering rate bills, because those fees in our analyses showed a very strong correlation with arrears. Next slide. So overall, we learned several lessons about water accessibility and affordability from both the implementation and impact report, as well as the water affordability survey through our program. Nationally, water is the fastest growing household utility cost, and partnerships with utilities are critical for understanding ongoing affordability and access to services. Layering resources is needed to address infrastructure needs and varying circumstances for each community. Flexibility in designing benefit structures can ensure support where it's needed. Data systems and information sharing strongly contribute to successful implementation, and outreach is essential for building awareness, especially with a new program. And now I'll pass it back over to Megan to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gwen. And with that, I will turn it over to Christina and Chris from the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. Christina?
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. So good afternoon, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. NACWA is really pleased to join OCS and the other panelists in recognizing World Water Week. Next slide. So as mentioned, my name is Christina, and I'm here today with my colleague Chris from the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, or NACWA. Next slide. NACWA represents over 350 public clean water agencies in the US. These are the municipal wastewater and stormwater agencies that serve communities of all sizes nationwide. Collectively, our members serve the majority of the sewered population in the country. And our mission at NACWA is to ensure that the nation's public clean water utilities can provide affordable and sustainable clean water services for all. Key to that mission is keeping on top of trends and challenges to providing these vital services, and then translating those local challenges into federal action. Affordability has emerged over the last 2 decades as a top challenge facing utilities and their customers. I'll turn it over to Chris to discuss one of NACWA's tools that track the cost of clean water. Chris?
Thanks, Christina, and thanks, Megan, for advancing that slide. So since 1992, we have conducted the NACWA Cost of Clean Water Index survey to track the cost of wastewater services. which for us includes both collection and treatment for the average single-family resident. So in other words, what we've been tracking is what does the average household bill for wastewater services only look like across the country? As was just mentioned, wastewater bills can be based on a number of different things and can kind of get confusing. It can be based on property values, gallons of water used, flat rates, or some combination of these and other values. So our index survey, we've tried to simplify things, and we allow the responding utilities to simply provide us with what the average annual bill looks like for single-family residents in their community, using whatever their methodology may be. Next slide. We report national information as an index value. We use 1985 as the base year, and we also report the dollar value, which really ends up being the most important. We also include the percent change from the previous year. So we look not only at the current year, but also the change from the prior year in terms of how much things have gone up. Results in our survey are population weighted. So a value from New York City that impacts more people will have more influence on the national average. This chart, which you'll have access to through links that we'll provide in this presentation, is included in each of our annual reports, and it provides the index and dollar values back to the base year of 1985. For 2023, if you look at the bottom row there, we received responses from 164 utility respondents across the country, which does cover a population of about 99 million people across the U.S. From between 2022 and 2023, we reported a 3.2% increase in the annual charge of wastewater, with the annual national average household wastewater bill being approximately $588. For perspective, that $588 average figure represents nearly 2% of the 2023 federal poverty income threshold for a family of four. Next slide. Great, thanks. For our report, we present data in a number of different ways. Here we see the dollar values of the national average household bill since 2000 compared to the Consumer Price Index expressed as a dollar value. At a glance, you can see that average annual bills have been increasing steadily, outpacing inflation pretty much every year. If we could include all years in one massive chart, which we can't figure out how to do and make it easy to read, you would see that this trend extends back to the start of the survey. Next slide. In this chart, we look at the annual percent change in household bills compared to the annual percent change in inflation across the time span here on the x-axis. The darkest bars indicate the percent change in the annual service charge or bill compared to the annual percent change in inflation based on the Consumer Price Index. That's the lighter colored bars adjacent to the dark blue bars. Until 2021, we had seen more than 2 decades of the percent increase in annual bills for wastewater services outpacing inflation. In some years, we saw those increases more than double the rate of inflation. A couple things I'd note from this chart, the steep increases between 2004 and 2009 that you see generally coincide with a period where we saw a large increase in the number of utilities who were placed under federal consent decree to address things like combined sewer overflows. We saw steep rate increases during those years. Rate increases are approved often years in advance. So the trends here don't always mirror what you might expect in the broader economy, but you can see in the 2020 to 2021 timeframe that utilities did report to us that they were holding off on or decreasing their planned rate increases for those years, which was at the height of the pandemic. Next slide. Part of our survey looks at projected increases for the next 5 years based on those approved and planned rate increases. This allows us to make some projections for the average annual bills for the next 5 years, which were included in those 2 previous slides that I showed. Projections from the most recent survey indicate that the average single-family residential bill for wastewater will exceed $600 this year. For 2023, infrastructure needs, as well as inflationary and regulatory cost pressures, were the most often cited reasons for planned or approved rate increases. Next slide. Given the variety of differences among the regions in terms of things like cost of living, as we all know, we also break out the data we receive by US EPA region. We compare all sorts of things, including current year values, and also look at trends. Looking at the 5-year percent change values at the bottom of this chart, the bottom row of this chart, you can see that some regions have had significant increases over the last 5 years. You can also see some of the maximum values from each of the regions, and you can see that in 4 of the regions, we had at least one utility reporting annual wastewater bills of over $1,000. And keep in mind, that's just wastewater. Next slide. All right, in addition to this national map showing the average annual charges for each EPA region and the other charts I've shown you, we also include several pages of additional analysis on the regional data as an appendix to the report. The survey results from this survey are free and available to the public on our website. And as I mentioned earlier, today's presentation includes a link to the survey on our website. Next slide. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Christina.
Thanks, Chris. So as we look at those historic trends and we also see what's coming down the pipeline in terms of clean water investment needs, it's clear costs will only continue to rise. And I want to reiterate that everything Chris has just shared is specific to wastewater and stormwater only. The drinking water costs, which the very same households, of course, also need to pay for, come on top of the clean water costs. And as we look at the trends on the drinking water side as well, the situation overall is similar, with sharply rising regulatory and investment costs. And together, of course, these drinking water and clean water services can all add up well beyond what many households can manage affordably. And that's the story we really just want to make sure people understand, that water was for many years undervalued, underinvested in, and then as far as utility bills go, it was thought to be relatively affordable, but that's no longer the case. Next slide. And starting in the mid-2000s, when, as we saw earlier, rates were increasing at the highest levels in a long time, our utility members began raising concerns about affordability of their services. And in a separate survey that NACWA conducts every 3 years, we've been tracking the increase in local customer assistance programs, which have been deployed by our member utilities or their communities to help minimize impacts on low-income households. This graph is an excerpt from that survey. Many utilities have local assistance programs. Some of them offer financial aid, like hardship grants. Others offer payment flexibility options or rate discounts. There's a host of different structures, and they may be administered or made available through the local utility itself, or working in tandem with community action agencies or other local nonprofits. But these funds are typically quite limited. For example, some utilities will raise funds doing local bill roundup programs or fundraising. In many cases, utilities are constrained at the state level from charging different customers different rates for the same service, or from using rate revenues to provide income qualified assistance for households. And that, of course, limits the amount of assistance that utilities can provide locally. The federal LIHWAP program provided significant support to address these affordability challenges, helping fill the gap between local programs and the overall need. As Megan said, 1.7 million households nationwide were served through the program. Solving the affordability challenge will continue to require a multi-pronged approach. Local programs continue to grow and will continue to help utilities learn from one another and innovating on the local-led programs. But as the data show, the cost of clean water continues to rise, and local water affordability challenges were going to remain a top concern well into the future. Last slide. With that, we'll wrap up. Thank you all for participating today, and contact us with any questions.
Thank you so much, Chris and Christina. We really appreciate your presentation today. And with that, I will transition over to Tammy, to give her presentation on the impact of LIHWAP with the Lumbee tribe. Tammy?
Hi, thank you. And we do at the Lumbee tribe really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak about what World Water Week means to us and how LIHWAP funding has played such a major role in the lives of our Lumbee tribal members. Next slide. In implementing the tribal LIHWAP program, we realized really early on, we have to leverage our existing resources in order for us to really maximize the services to our tribal members. So we looked across the programs inside the organization, and we saw our rehab program that was providing services to tribal members to bring their homes up to standard during the time of COVID and when the LIHWAP funding came out. So we started working together that if we had a bill that was just so large that we needed to pool our resources, the Indian Housing Block Grant was one of the resources we were able to turn to and say, hey, can you help us to get this utility bill paid? Along with looking at our emergency services program, we also went across to our tribal support services programs where we were serving families and elders, and we were literally all working together to leverage our resources to help our tribal members with their water crisis. And what we realized is that the crisis that was existing during COVID, it had been there prior to COVID. It was exacerbated because of COVID, and that crisis still is here with us today. That is not gone. The funding is gone. LIHWAP does not exist anymore for us. We spent every dime and we spent it within the time frame that was allowed. We did not require a no-cost extension because we had 65,000 tribal members, and during that time, we were in absolute disarray. Our tribal citizens needed help. Next slide. When we looked across this program, we realized just how much the LIHWAP program did for our tribal members during COVID. I mean, hardships that were absolutely no fault of their own. We were able to go in and help them, again, leveraging our resources to maximize the dollars that we had so that it could go further. We realized that we had tribal members that really needed access to just clean water. Members were, when they heard about the program, they were coming through the door, and these people had rust in their water. They had contaminants in their water. Their water was brown. They were drinking well water that was not able to be utilized to wash or eat or anything. So because of the LIHWAP funding, we were able to go out to their homes, connect them on to the water source that they had, whether it be the county, the city, the town, whatever it may have been. We were able to help to get them access. Now, while LIHWAP could pay the connection fee, our housing program stepped in and helped with the infrastructure costs to run the lines to their homes. And that's important because just because we were able to, LIHWAP could pay for the connection, they still needed infrastructure work done. And we found that this was happening most often with our elderly families that needed access to clean water. We even had one gentleman that we helped to prolong his life with the LIHWAP funding that the government sent in. He needed access to clean water so that he could receive dialysis. It wasn't a matter of just wanting to have access. This was life or death. And these kinds of situations are still with us today. LIHWAP funding was critical, and it's still a very much needed funding that our tribal members, and I think other members throughout our county and our state and our region and our country still need access to, is to have access to clean water. Tribal members, they had to have it, like I said, due to health concerns. There were issues where families said, if we had not done this, maybe our father would have died. Our mother may not still be here with us. So this funding has truly impacted the lives of people. It's not something that we think it may have done. We know it did it. We know that people are healthier today because they had access to water, clean water. And in our community, I can remember, I've been with the Lumbee tribe for a very long time, and I've worked with lots of programs, but I can remember in the very beginning to access water, the county water, I think it was $250. Today, that cost is $1,700. Where does a family who's living on a fixed income get that kind of money when they're living on a paycheck of $800 or $900 a month. It's impossible. Our neighboring county, which is also in our service area, $5,000 to tap onto the county or city water. Fortunately for them, they do allow those families to pay over a period of time that tap home fee. But even paying $25 or $50 a month, that's money that's coming out of their household that they could have used for medicine, for food, for lights, medicine. Those are the kinds of things that they need as well. So this funding has been critical, and it's needed, and it's still needed today. It was needed, and it is still needed today. Tribal members needed access to these services. One of the things that this funding helped us to realize at the Lumbee Tribe as a best practice is to improve our access to services for our tribal members. We thought that you ought to have to come into the office and do an application, and we very quickly, COVID helped us to realize very quickly that that is not necessarily the best thing. So we developed an application portal to help reduce the administrative burden we were placing on our tribal members. There was no reason for tribal members to have to travel that far into we have a 900 square mile, just one county's 900 square miles. So we service 4 counties. So they were traveling all the way to our office to complete an application. This process, this funding helped us realize we need to make ourselves more accessible. In the technical assistance trainings we had almost, it felt like monthly with OCS. We need to figure out how to alleviate the administrative burden, and we did that. We developed a portal that was simple to use, as simple as using your cell phone and getting on Facebook and uploading pictures and photos. We thought we got to make this simple, and we did. And we took our services into the community. We took our information to the community. We went to the people, and we saw that our tribal members benefited from that so much more. And again, as a result of that, we were able to maximize our services. We streamlined our case management with our clients so that when they called in, they had a case manager that helped them with their water, their lights, whatever it was. They were assigned to one person, and they weren't having to be juggled around to 5 or 6 different people to get help. And that, I think, eased a lot of the burden and a lot of the stress that was already on them with, having to ask us for services anyway or having to apply. So we did develop some really great best practices as a result of the funding that we received from the government. And I would be remiss if I did not share this, that this funding created jobs in our communities, not just for our tribal government, but for our vendors. Our vendors often said that this funding was an economic catalyst in their departments. They had to hire staff to ensure that our payments were credited to the clients. So that was a great thing, that we created jobs in our different communities as a result of the funding that we received. Again, while the water program may have ended, the water access issue does still exist. And we thank you. And if you have any questions, we would love to be able to speak with you more. And again, I'm Tammy Maynor. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Lumbee Tribe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tammy, and thank you so much for sharing the experience with tribal members in the Lumbee Tribe. We truly appreciate hearing your story. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And with that, I will turn it over to Robert to talk about the program that served residents in Philadelphia. Robert?
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Robert Ballinger. I'm an attorney in Philadelphia at Community Legal Services. And let's jump in and talk about Philadelphia's Low Income Assistance Program. So I'm going to echo Tammy a little bit. Obviously, this is a really important issue, and access to affordable water is really a social need as well as an individual household need. And I just want to lift up this article linked at the bottom of the page, which is really the first effort that I've seen to sort of catalog and even try to quantify some of the social costs of a loss of water service. More work's needed on that, but I do encourage you to look at it if you have a chance. Next slide, please. So access to affordable water, in addition to being a social need and an imperative, is also reflective of racial justice issues. And we see that in Philadelphia. We see the concentration of properties subject to loss of service due to unaffordable water bills, really aligning with the higher concentration neighborhoods of Black and Hispanic Philadelphians, according to the census designations. So TAP, as our tiered assistance program, our local water affordability program, really arose from that recognition. The bill's sponsor, Councilwoman Maria Quinones-Sanchez, her district was very heavily impacted by water debt. Let's go to the next slide, please. So in addition to sort of looking at water debt and where the incidence of water debt in the city of Philadelphia, we also observed that water debt prior to implementation of the tiered assistance program was increasing and becoming increasingly uncollectible. And so over a single year's period from the end of fiscal year 2013 to fiscal year 2014, the amount of liened water debt in the city of Philadelphia increased by $30 million. A little over $30 million. And at the same time, the total amount of water debt was becoming increasingly unaffordable, with more than 80%, sorry, I said unaffordable, I mean unattainable, with more than 80% of that water debt being more than 2 years old. And in general, if you're trying to collect a debt that's more than 2 years old, you're going to have a very low likelihood of actually collecting it. And the water department recognized that in their own rate filings. Let's go to the next slide. So without getting into the depth of it, we tried different forms of water assistance prior to the creation of the tiered assistance program, and they weren't working. So CLS, my organization, worked with City Council to pass the ordinance that authorized and created the framework for a new program, what we call the tiered assistance program. And we've continued to advocate for improvements to that over time. Next slide, please. So I want to just give you sort of the skeleton of what the legislation looks like. And I think it's important to just highlight that when I talk about water affordability, I'm talking about the entire water and sewer and stormwater bill. These are bundled services provided in Philadelphia. So this legislation applies to the combined water, sewer, and stormwater service. And it mandates that TAP bills shall be affordable for low-income households based on a percentage of household income. It clarifies that TAP bills are charged in lieu of the tariff rates for the services, meaning the city can't come back and try to recoup those additional amounts from the household. The city has an obligation when someone applies for assistance to identify the most affordable alternative for them. And customers who are on TAP only have to pay their TAP bills to continue to receive water service. They don't have to pay back any of the debt they may have accumulated, because under the same ordinance, earned forgiveness of arrearages shall be available to those participants who pay their TAP bills. These were not novel provisions at the time they were adopted in 2015, because really they were modeled off of the electric and gas affordability programs that we've had in Pennsylvania since the 1990s. They've just now applied to water, as some folks have said earlier from the NACWA presentation. Water's become more unaffordable across the board. So we need to use some of the tools that we have, and the electric and gas industries provided that for us in Philadelphia. Next slide. I'm not going to go into the implementation so much as to say that we have an independent water rate making board, and the ordinance required us to go before the board and to present what we thought would be the right style of program. CLS, Community Legal Services, we believed that the program should be a percentage of income payment program where the bill is a fixed percentage of household income between 2% and 3% and up to 4% for customers between 0 and 250% of federal poverty level. The board agreed with us. And so that's how bills are calculated. A household's income is multiplied by the applicable percentage for them, and that is the total monthly bill that household has to pay, unless there's a more affordable alternative for them. As far as the arrearage forgiveness component, that has lagged behind implementation, but as of July 2022, we finally have an arrearage forgiveness program that credits the customer for payment and for 1/24th forgiveness with every TAP bill that is paid, so that the customer earns their way out of debt after 2 years of participation in the tiered assistance program. Next slide, please. So I represent individuals as well as organizations, and serve as our city's public advocate in water rate making. But I want to talk about what my clients went through before and after TAP. Prior to TAP, our clients could experience really significant delay, and it could take a year or more to get an affordable bill under the predecessor program. We were virtually incapable of helping folks who lived in homes that were owned by, for example, their deceased relatives, tangled title owners. They typically had to get ownership before they could get an affordable bill payment arrangement. The prior program was also a 12-month program. So every year you had to start over. And that meant that we had a lot of customers coming back to us year after year after year. TAP changed that fundamentally. TAP determinations are typically made very quickly. The program isn't constrained in any way by the number of participants or its costs. And the city has really come up in collaboration with us with a way to handle some of those tangled title occupants in a much more efficient manner, where we can get those customers enrolled in the bill payment assistance program and get their debt eliminated as well. Finally, we changed from having an annual program to having a program that currently recertifies participation once every 4 years. So customers don't get kicked off after 12 months. They do have an obligation to provide updates on their household information. Next slide, please. So just from the perspective of my clients, TAP has been tremendously successful. And I link here to an article from a client of ours in a Cleveland newspaper that picked up her story. And it took her from a position of thinking she was going to lose her family home to having a bill that she could afford to pay and plan for every month. Tenants in Philadelphia still do face some particular obstacles because their landlords can prevent them from getting customer status. And that means that they can't participate in TAP. This was one of the reasons why when LIHWAP funds became available, we, CLS, really prioritized making sure our clients who were tenants knew about this, because for them, this was really the only game in town. LIHWAP was the only thing that could pay a tenant bill, even if it was in the landlord's name still. And the consequences of non-payment of that bill for a tenant could mean eviction, loss of housing. So we go to the next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about data sharing, something that the city was able to do with LIHWAP. We were able to identify more than 3,000 new TAP enrollees, customers who hadn't accessed the program but were qualified based on their income, because we got the same data and eligibility requirement standards met through DHS providing the city with the LIHWAP data. That was sort of the start of the snowball in Philadelphia, frankly. Our city went through a variety of means-tested programs and data that it attained through the Integrated Data for Evidence and Action Office, IDEA, and identified, in combination with LIHWAP data, nearly 40,000 households who were qualified for the low-income assistance program and hadn't enrolled. Those customers were pre-qualified, and as a result, our tiered assistance program has reached as high as 57,000 households, and that's the current approximate level of enrollment in the program. Next slide, please. Finally, close the loop on arrearage forgiveness, and what started us on this journey was water debt through the tiered assistance program. So through about 2 years of participation, TAP participants have earned forgiveness of more than $31 million of their water debt. So we're increasingly lifting the weight of the water debt that has been imposed on homes in low-income communities. The city continues to explore ways to make TAP easier to access, and there are designated staff within city government who actually work to do the outreach. And there's some really exciting work going on there to try to reach as many people as possible. Next slide, please. Oh, that's the end. Very good. Well, thank you. I look forward to hearing any questions you have, and feel free to reach out about the tiered assistance program or anything in Philadelphia.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you so much for sharing the example of that program and the impact it's having on residents of Philadelphia. With that, we will go ahead and turn things over to Tony from the Greater Cincinnati Water Works to talk about what's going on in their community. Tony?
Thank you, Megan. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about our journey answering the affordability concerns that we have seen in our community. So just a quick background. We are the oldest municipally owned utility in the state of Ohio. We have 242,000 customer accounts and serve about 1.1 million people regionally. It is important to understand as I move forward throughout my presentation that we bill, although we are a water utility, we bill for wastewater, stormwater, trash, and fire hydrant maintenance services. So when I talk about affordability, it's not just what we can do with the water, it's about what we can do for all services we bill for. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start this pre-pandemic. So prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, our delinquency, our past due amounts for all services were about close to $12 million. And then the number of accounts eligible for disconnection was a little over 10,000. Now, during the height of the pandemic, we reached a total past due debt of close to 28 million and almost 16,000 customers eligible for shutoff. So that was a big indication that we needed to do something as we move forward. Next slide, please. So the first thing that we did is we developed a payment plan portal. We knew that we needed to have some flexibility. So that was the biggest thing. And we understood that from the get-go, but it became even more important as we move forward. Flexibility was very important to consider as we come up with a solution for our customers. So prior to the pandemic, with those 10,000 customers eligible for shutoff, about 60% of them would cycle. So if we would allow them enough time, they would eventually pay their past due debt and become current on their account to avoid shutoff. And so instead of us rolling a vehicle out to complete the shutoff or to do a post notice and spend $150 every time you roll a truck, we would just give our customers time. And they would eventually pay and get current on their account. So when we developed this payment plan portal, we partnered with Promise Network, and they helped us develop the Promise Pay portal. Customers can go online on their cell phones and get interest-free, flexible payment plans. And it was very simple. Over the past 3 years, we've had over about 7,000 payment plans at a time and have collected more than $6 million from that payment plan portal. Next slide, please. We also decided that we were going to go a different route when we reinstituted delinquent shutoffs. So after the moratoriums ended, we continued on in Cincinnati, Greater Cincinnati, with not doing shutoffs. And so when we finally decided that we had our payment plan portal in place, we understood that we needed to make some changes to our processes. We were more comfortable with moving forward with reinstituting shutoffs. And so we use census data to give customers more customers in low income areas, more time to pay and to take advantage of all the options out there, which included our payment plan portal, plus the federal and local funding that was available at the time. We also changed the way we communicated with our customers. So prior to the pandemic, customers would receive a blaster call or an automatic phone call the night before a shutoff was completed, and to let them know that we would be in their area. Well, it was not specific whatsoever, and plus it gave customers almost no time to figure out how to avoid the shutoff. So what we did is we instituted these 2-week notifications. So 2 weeks in advance of the shutoff, we would let our customers know the exact date that we would be out there to complete the delinquent shutoff. And that would give them the opportunity to find ways to get current on their account or to avoid shutoff, whether they sign up for a payment plan or talk to us about the other the ways that they can get funding. We also offered very lenient options to reestablish water service after shutoff, and that included our payment plan portal. So, you know, if a down payment of 30% or 50% could be made, and then the rest enrolled in a payment plan, customers would be able to get their water turned back on. Prior to the pandemic, it was you pay the full balance, we'll turn the water on. Of course, after the pandemic, we're dealing with much higher balances, so we had to come up with another solution. We applied more than $4 million in federal funding, and that included ERA Phase 2 funds that we applied directly to customer accounts. We had our own application process, and then it also included other federal funding, including LIHWAP. Of course, we in the state of Ohio, we utilized our community action agencies to handle the application process for all of those funds, including the LIHWAP funds. I would say that for some of the smaller utilities, I think the community action agencies were very beneficial. For some of the larger utilities who had more depth to be able to handle that process, we felt like there could have been more opportunities for us in that. Next slide, please. So after we responded in those ways, we saw that 59% of accounts that received federal funding were then delinquent again. And now funds are, we've run out of funds, so they're no longer there. 62% of our customers enrolled in a pay plan became delinquent on their current charges, although they maintained a 91% success rate on actually paying their payment plans. And then 18% of accounts that we shut off were left off after the delinquent shutoff was completed. And then 89% of shutoffs are in low income areas. So on the next slide, I have a map of our service area, and those blue dots are our shutoffs that we've completed over top of the EJ screen of the low income communities in our area, and it overlaps almost perfectly. So with that information, it was very clear that we need to develop a sustainable customer assistance programs, because what we were doing and then the fact that funds were running out, it wasn't enough and we needed to do more. Next slide, please. So we developed, well, first I want to also mention that what we noticed is that, well, I'll talk about that in a second, but I'll go ahead and jump into this affordability strategy. So we decided to develop an affordability strategy with a multi-pronged approach to customer assistance programs. The first is a past due debt relief up to 50%. And what this program will do is allow a customer to get debt forgiveness immediately, and then once they apply, and then enroll the remaining balance into a payment plan. And so it's not customers paying a certain amount of time and then the incentive at the end of the plan is for them to get forgiveness. It's that they get it up front, because what that does is that lowers their monthly expenses. So when they go into a payment plan, it's based on their total debt on the account balance. And so by going ahead and forgiving upfront, it allows their monthly expenses to be decreased by 19%, which will be a huge help to our customers. The next program is a 25% discount for senior citizens and disabled veterans. And then we hope there be an average saving of about $217 a year for those customers. And now the goal is for us to have these programs in place by January 1. We are currently working on finalizing development and getting those out there. Next slide, please. All right, so this is what I wanted to talk about earlier. So what we found out during our whole process in developing these, developing our responses and going through the process of developing our affordability strategy is that the majority of our past due debt that was accumulated during the height of the pandemic was on customers that were already struggling. So about so we had about 35,000 customers that were delinquent at the time, at the height of the pandemic, or prior to the pandemic, and at the height of the pandemic, it grew to about 40,000. However, the past due debt grew more than 150%. So it was clear that it wasn't just new customers because of the pandemic. It was that the pandemic completely exacerbated our customers that were already struggling. Then when we get into developing these programs in response, we found out that even though we are discounting that the average bill is 5.98% of incomes of the income for customers at 50% of the federal poverty level, and that's just one subset. But when Robert spoke, he talked about how Philadelphia looked at, I think it was 150% of the federal poverty level or below, 2 to 3% of income. And that is typical for a lot of the assistance programs throughout the country for water. And it was clear what we are doing is not affordable. And so, but we have a lot of limitations. And then also 58.5% over affordable bill burden for the majority of our customers who would be eligible for these programs. So it's been very clear that there needs to be consistent funding for our low income assistance. And that's something that we need in the future to be successful. Next slide, please. And so I just want to wrap up by identifying that, you know, although unlike Philadelphia or other cities that have all utilities that are municipally owned, in the greater Cincinnati area, we have our water is owned by the municipality of Cincinnati, but the sewer is a sewer district in the state of Ohio, so they have different regulations. So it's not just as easy as for us to put a discount program in place. We had to think outside the box, which is why we come up with the programs that we did, because the boundaries of authority are much different for the utilities. And the state, and although the state of Ohio, the state code gives the authority to the sewer district, they don't give the authority for the discounts like we could do in the city because we have home rule. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening to me and joining us today. I'll turn it back over to Megan.
Thank you so much, Tony, and thank you so much for sharing the work that you're doing in Cincinnati to try and address the ongoing need for those in your community. Up next, I'm going to turn this over to Patrice as we begin to talk about what types of other programs are available to address water affordability outside of providing direct bill assistance. So Patrice, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Megan. The Rural Community Development, or RCD, program works with regional and tribal organizations to manage safe water systems in rural communities and to provide training and technical assistance to very small, low-income rural communities in developing and managing affordable and safe water and wastewater treatment facilities. Next slide. Projects funded through the RCD program work to ensure access to safe water and wastewater systems for rural Americans with low incomes. RCD grantees are multi-state, regional, private, nonprofit organizations, including tribal organizations that provide training and technical assistance to help establish, maintain, repair, and sustain water facilities. RCD is unique in that it serves the smallest rural communities which are not served by other programs. It is different from EPA and USDA programs, which tend to support existing programs. In this way, it serves the truly underserved, which includes the unincorporated communities without systems. While grant funds cannot fund the actual construction of water and wastewater infrastructure, they can be used to develop the organizational and financial systems needed to attract additional funding. In this way, the program can be thought of as the grout that brings the bricks together. Next slide. RCD funds are used to provide training and technical assistance to increase access to safe water and wastewater disposal services in low-income communities, manage safe water systems in rural and tribal communities, preserve affordable community water and wastewater facilities, ensure the safety and security of water systems, improve local capacity and leadership to support water systems and service, and train water operators. RCD serves very small communities in sparsely populated areas made up predominantly of residents with low income who lack safe water and wastewater treatment services, and often indoor plumbing. Many of these communities have populations less than 2,500 people without clean water systems or access to existing water systems. There are currently 8 RCD grant recipients, 6 regional organizations, and 2 organizations that specifically support tribal communities, which collectively serve all regions of the country. Now I'll turn it back over to Megan.
Thanks so much, Patrice, and thanks for sharing the details about the RCD program. Really appreciate it. Up next, we're going to have Ellen join us from the US EPA and talk about the abundance of programs that are available with our partners at the EPA to address water affordability from a different perspective. Ellen, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Megan, and really glad to be here and keep along that same line of how we can address water affordability holistically. If you go to the next slide. A lot of the great information that was just incredible of how much impact the customer assistance programs and LIHWAP in particular has had to communities across the country. It's such a critical part of how to address water affordability, as you all know. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some other aspects of sort of this roadmap to affordability that can be done to help some of those low-income customers and help address some of the water affordability issues and really focus on some of the capital costs and increasing water efficiency through programs like the WaterSense. If you go to the next slide. The needs are great, they're significant. Recently EPA put out 2 separate needs surveys, one focused on clean water for the Clean Water Needs Assessment with over $630 billion in needs identified. And the drinking water side, it's really not much different, $625 billion in needs. And all of this funding that's needed for water infrastructure to be able to meet some of the human health and environmental concerns are just incredibly great. And one of the big concerns for affordability, as you've heard throughout this presentation, and you all know from your experience, is a lot of times a lot of that need is driven by having to generate revenue from ratepayers. And that's really what leads to a lot of the affordability challenges that you all are seeing in your communities and are facing head on. If you go to the next slide. So one of the ways and one of the tools that EPA has to help address this is the State Revolving Fund program. I hope for a lot of you who are at utilities, you already know about the SRF program. It's something that's hopefully familiar to you and you've applied, you've used it, you've utilized this sort of low cost funding resource at your utility. And if you haven't, I hope this is going to pique your interest and there'll be some of the resources at the end of this presentation that you can go and pursue how to reduce some of that capital cost by utilizing the SRF program. The SRF program, it's a state federal program that really provides some of that funding and financing for a wide range of water quality and drinking water improvement. And the intent of it is to really help reduce some of the costs of that infrastructure, to provide some federal assistance to be able to fund some of those infrastructure upgrades through below market rate interest, through grants, through principal forgiveness programs, to be able to allow utilities to come in and to be able to access low cost federal funding for their water infrastructure needs. If you go to the next slide. So the benefits, again, if you're just learning about this, I just can't tell enough. It's a really fantastic program for a lot of utilities because it is versatile. It's reliable funding. It's funding that can really help meet a wide range of different products. There is no federal minimum or maximum for the loan, and really it has the ability to cover 100% of the total cost of the loan, and really even can be used as a grant match. There's attractive terms, and we'll talk about some of the where this makes a difference for some of the infrastructure projects, but terms can go up to 30 years or the useful life of a project. the below market rate interest value, and even going as low as 0%, makes a humongous difference in terms of how utilities can fund their infrastructure projects, how they can do that capital improvement plans that really meet the needs of all of their customers without having to constantly rely on rate increases. And even the rate payments can start after the successful project completion. And so these are just a lot of really attractive features about this loan program. And if you go to the next slide, I think one of the biggest ones really below market rate loan aspect of it. And if you've done any, financing, maybe you've looked at some mortgages for your own house, or you've done this for your water systems in your communities, having just an SRF that really it's a substantial bargain to be below that market rate over some of the traditional financing options. For example, if you had a market rate that was about 7% and you were able to secure a 3% SRF loan, that could save tens of thousands of dollars on any of those projects, and really even millions of dollars. I'll show an example from Hampton Roads where they were able to save over $33 million by coming in for that SRF loan at a really low interest rate. And that means that savings, they're not passed on to the ratepayers. The ratepayers don't have to have increases that leads to more affordability problems for all of those systems. You've seen in some of the earlier presentations that rates are increasing along the way, and it's going up because those costs are going up for being able to run systems, to be able to meet public health needs, to be able to meet environmental needs, and to be able to get funding that comes in at a lower rate that allows a utility to save money means that maybe some of those rate increases can be offset a bit. And the affordability problem isn't just continuing to grow, that there's some avenues where some of that pressure can be relieved a little bit with some of this low-cost federal funding. So if you go to the next slide. There's a lot of different ways that the SRF can really help advance affordability for communities in a lot of different ways. And one of them, there's affordability criteria for the states that help identify communities that might be experiencing hardship to help in raising revenues for their loan repayment. And a lot of times those affordability criteria are based on income, they're based on unemployment, population trends, other information that's determined by the states to help them really identify what are the communities that need the most help, what are the communities that are going to need the most grant in terms of when they come in for that loan application, or what are the communities that are going to need some principal forgiveness. And it's also a big focus thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, where they created really this incredible opportunity for states to help target some of that assistance to communities that do have these known either environmental justice concerns, low income neighborhoods, communities that just have been struggling, where 49% of the tremendous amount of bipartisan infrastructure law funds that were allocated to the SRF program can go out as additional subsidization or grant funding to help the communities that really do meet that state criteria. So that's just one of the ways that the SRF is really helping support affordability needs, particularly in those communities that have known challenges because of income levels, because of affordability challenges, because of known EJ issues in those communities. There's also an ability with the SRF program to even extend further special loan terms and really reduce borrowing rates for communities that are qualified for some of those definitions, to really extend the ability to help stretch out those loan repayments, really make it more affordable so you don't have this big upfront cost, that you can really stretch that out over decades to be able to help communities more easily pay back some of those loans and put less pressure and stress on the utilities themselves. This includes loan forgiveness, grants, that's a big part of this, and some technical assistance. So if you go to the next slide. Hampton Roads is, one of the examples I gave, and just to put this in real terms, it's where Hampton Roads came in for a really large project to help meet a consent decree negotiation. It's something that was flagged earlier as a big cost for a lot of communities to meet some of the consent decrees and really deal with the sewer overflows in their areas. And when Hampton Roads came in, they were able to bundle a bunch of different projects and come in for a large loan amount, $100 million. They were able to secure a 1.15% interest rate loan through the SRF program for 100 million of those dollars. That allowed them to save, again, $33 million in debt service compared to issuing just a revenue bond. That's a significant amount of money to be able to save over this project. And, that's funding that either isn't passed down to ratepayers, that they're not having to increase rates to generate that revenue, or it perhaps frees up money in the utility to do some other things. So it makes a big difference for some of these utilities, for some of these big projects to come in to get some of that low cost financing to reduce the overall cost of their capital. And so they don't have to pass that on to some of the ratepayers. If you go to the next slide. A lot of this, especially if you don't know the SRF program before, it's a lot of information out there, and you might just even be wondering, well, where do we go to start, or how do we put together an application, or what could this mean for our community? And again, I'll point to the bipartisan infrastructure law, where there were significant funds that were made available to help those communities who need it apply for funding. And this is just a list of some of those aspects of where they can get some of that funding, what help can be provided, and how some of that help can be targeted to specific communities. If you go to the next slide. There's a lot of different things that the water TA providers, it's similar to what you just saw from RCD, but provides assistance to those other communities. It really provides assistance to help with a lot of these different aspects, like planning, project development, partnership, funding and financing, and program management. So if you've heard some of this presentation about the SRF and you're curious, could this help us in our community? Is this something that you're thinking about maybe you should pursue or at least look into? I just encourage you to reach out to look at the Water TA program, because they can help you think through, is this SRF something that you could apply to? Or are there projects you have in mind that might be really suitable for this kind of funding? If you go to the next slide. And just an example of one of the communities that did reach out that got help, is small communities. So it's, communities of a lot of different sizes, just over 400 people. They were worried about meeting some of the needed infrastructure upgrades to their system in Akron, Michigan. They came in, they were worried about rate increasing, and we were able to work with them and to submit an SRF application to apply for funding, so they wouldn't have to pass on a lot of the upgrades to rate increases for their customer, because they did have a lot of affordability concerns about what that could mean. And so it's just a larger way to address affordability for communities of all sizes. If you go to the next slide. When we talk about household affordability for water, we don't want to lose sight that you're paying for a service, water that's available 24/7, the turn of a tap, but also the water itself. And if we can help users to be more efficient in how they use water, they'll be able to save the cost of that water, make that water bill more affordable every month, and even help with some of the energy reduction that goes into heating that water for households. EPA's Water Sense program is there to help customers make smarter choices about how they use water. That might be replacing, that old workhorse 5-gallon per flush toilet from the 1980s that a house has to a 1-gallon per flush toilet. It might be making smarter decisions about how you water your yard, what kind of yard you have, encouraging teenagers to make a shorter shower rather than having that 20-minute long shower, or fixing a running toilet or a leaky faucet in a household. And it can save just trillions of gallons of water every year. If you go to the next slide. WaterSense knew that some of the utility partners were helping to address affordability challenges, even if they weren't really aware that they were doing it, because it was just their normal conservation work. Back in 2021, the program gathered a group of ones that they knew had made the connection to water efficiency and affordability, and asked them to share what they were doing, how it was going. And really what this slide does is it shows the types of programs that each of these groups was offering. You can see that WaterSense labeled products were a big focus, but also services to help customers repair leaks and plumbing problems was also a really big thing that we saw that utilities and communities just as yourself that are online are doing at the household level, or doing in your communities, and really making a difference. If you go to the next slide. This really just shares some of the examples of some of those stories of some of those communities and partners in the US and Canada, even states and utilities, just a diverse way that they're reaching the customers in need, that they're offering some of these programs, some of these examples, some of this assistance to really help with water efficiency, and having that really tie back to affordability concerns where they're reaching out to the communities in just some creative ways. And if you go to the next slide, just based on everything you heard from the partners, really the WaterSense program put together a great guide to help other utilities, local governments make the connection between water efficiency and affordability. Some of those examples that I just showed briefly on that slide, if you want to learn more, maybe that's just a bit of a teaser. Really go check out this guide for yourself. It's a really, really great resource. It provides suggestions on how programs can be developed, some of those hard-earned lessons from partners who did a lot of that hard work on the ground, stood up some of these programs, and some case studies of success where it's worked really, really well. That might be a useful resource for you all in your own programs if you want to look at how you can really make that connection between water efficiency and affordability. And then the last slide is just some of the links, some of the different places. If you've heard a little bit about maybe the SRF program, about that WaterSense program, about the technical assistance resources that are available, or the Water Infrastructure and Resiliency Finance Center, please go explore it and feel free to reach out. And we're happy to talk about some of the affordability actions that, that EPA is doing in that space. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Ellen, for sharing all of the amazing programs that EPA can offer right now to provide water utility assistance. I will also share our next slide provides additional links to resources from all of the panelists today. And so we will be sharing this final presentation out with attendees so that you can have access to these links after today's presentation. I did want to flag for participants that if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to utilize the Q&A feature on the webinar. I know one question has been previously addressed, but there looks to be one remaining question there. Ellen, if I could ask you to pop back on, I think this one is for you. So the question today is SRF an option for water systems like Jackson, Flint, Michigan? Are SRF funds large enough to tackle the grave problems of those water systems?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the SRF programs have been working with Flint and they have been working with Jackson because there's a lot of need there. And I'll take those two systems out because I know that there was also special funding that was appropriated to deal with the very large concerns that they have for water infrastructure in both of those areas. And so it is an option for those kinds of systems, and even more options are available for them. But there's no maximum and there's no minimum for the SRF program. And so it is a resource, and it's a great resource a lot of large systems have tapped into, and we encourage you all to look at it for those systems as well.
Thank you so much. I don't think that there are any additional questions that have come up in the Q&A today, but the contact information will be shared and has been on the OCS World Water Week website. So if you have specific questions for OCS or any of our panelists, please feel free to reach out to us today. I also want to just say thank you to our panelists and for everyone attending today's session. I hope that you found today's information helpful as you are continuing to work to address the most basic need of trying to provide water assistance to those in need within your community. Again, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out and we will share the presentation materials later this week. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.